I think it's finally time I talk about this issue. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten all the information I wanted, so I'm gonna have to go with what I've been thinking over the past few months. And I will say, this video may not be as heavily edited as my other videos, but I just wanted to get my opinions across in a easy and concise way. So if it's not as entertaining to watch as some of my other videos, I apologize. This is meant to mainly just kind of get these thoughts out of my head and onto screen. As of the time of this recording, the beta for Killing Floor 3 hasn't started yet, so my thoughts might change once I get my hands on the game. But until then, I'm going to be going based off what we know. For months, I thought maybe, just maybe, I was misunderstanding the posts about the specialist system. That maybe it was just that each character is going to have a special move tied to them, which sucks, but it's something that could change. But now I realize that no, Mr. Foster being the commando of the group isn't just flavor text, but that the perks are being combined with the character. The way they talked about the specialist system in the videos made it sound like it was just going to be flavor text, because they would constantly go on about how they're trying to not limit the player in terms of the arsenal that they choose to use, which led to a lot of confusion for me. But every time I read the blog posts about the specialists, it just makes it sound like, yes, if you want to play Mr. Foster, then you have to be commando. Which sucks for me, because I'm someone who loves Mr. Foster, but prefers to use shotguns. I can see the idea here. Making the characters have a specific perk and a specific ability helps develop them as a character, because now we understand what their skills are and why they're a part of this team. Killing Floor was always lacking in the story department. There's no audio logs to listen to or even emails to read to gain a full understanding of the story. The story is told to us from basically just blog posts about upcoming updates, some character dialogue, a few comics, and some flavor text. Yes, there was objective mode which had a story in it, but that kind of felt more self-contained. I know it wasn't supposed to be, but it kind of felt like it was. And it's also hard to tell if the Steamland stuff is canon or not. What always came first in Killing Floor was its gameplay. It was the most important part, followed by the character customizations, and finally the story. In Killing Floor 1, every character was just a reskin, because they all had the exact same dialogue. Even the Pyro that's from the TF2 crossover they had used the same lines as everybody else. He barely resembled the Team Fortress 2 character that we know and love. He didn't even have a muffled voice. And in Killing Floor 2, there were less characters, but each one felt like their own person. They were all unique in their voice and dialogue, and you could give them cosmetic items. Sometimes they even talk about what their favorite weapon is, like Mr. Foster loves the Chris SMG. The different characters didn't change the gameplay, but it added a nice bit of customization, like making a custom mask in Payday. And if you wanted to play the game differently, you could just pick a different perk. But now the characters are tied to specific perks, which limits the player. Not just in their customization, but playstyles. I want to play as Mr. Foster, goddammit. He's my guy, and Commando is not my perk. Not that I have anything wrong with Commando. I do enjoy it, but it's not one of my top 3 favorite perks. Support, Gunslinger, SWAT, Berserker, and then maybe Commando. Something that I think Tripwire needs to talk about is how the weapons are going to work in Killing Floor 3. Right now, all we know is that going off perk, which is when you use a weapon that's not meant for the perk you're playing, won't be as big of an issue. Or at least that's what we've been told. We don't actually know how this is the case. We haven't really gotten to see that, in part because it's hard to tell what some weapons are, or who they belong to. And I want to get this out of the way. I have no problems with the more sci-fi route that Killing Floor 3 has gone with. I've never really had an issue with it in either of the previous 2 games. As long as the weapons were fun to use, that's all that mattered. Honestly, having a combination of realistic and sci-fi weapons kind of add a lot of variety to the game. It opened up the game to more possibilities. But here, in what is supposed to be a method to reduce the restrictiveness of the perks, they've made the game overall more restrictive. And there are ways that I can see you can show a character as a specialist in something without restricting the player. Let's take a look at Payday 2. Narratively, each character specializes in something, and this is shown via the perk decks. Sydney's the anarchist, Jacket's a sociopath, etc. To add to this, you also have their different rooms in the safe house, which each tell you different things about them, like for instance Chains being in the armory. But you weren't restricted on who you could play in any way. You could play as Jacket and run the Anarchist perk deck, which is what I did most of the time. Another great example of this is Dead by Daylight. Every character has teachable perks. For example, Adrenaline is a Meg Thomas perk, but once you level her up enough, other characters will have access to the perk once they unlock it in their Blood Web. You could play as Bill from Left 4 Dead without using any of his perks. This allows the player to customize their looks separately from their gameplay. Not to mention in the case of Killing Floor 2 and Payday 2, the dialogue for them also changes. But this new specialist system locks you into a specific thing. No matter how much Tripwire says Killing Floor 3 is not a hero shooter, it sounds like one. A game where you play a specific way based on the character you choose is very hero shootery. The thing is, I can see ways you can achieve the various goals they claim. You can make it so the abilities aren't tied to a specific character. Make them teachable, like in Dead by Daylight. You can even use the same method. Reach a certain level with a character, and then you're allowed to use that ability on other characters. Narratively, this would also make sense. If you work with someone in an office setting for long enough, you're going to start learning things about what they do and how you could do the same thing. If we take a look at the screenshots for Killing Floor 3, we can see that we have a much more expansive skill tree for each character. It definitely feels like an upgrade from Killing Floor 2. The downside to this, though, is that every character is going to have a very specific skill tree. So no two commandos are going to be the exact same. And yes, that is supposedly how they're planning on adding more characters. Like if they wanted to add DJ Scully, he could be made into another commando, and his skill tree would be different from Mr. Foster. Now, while this does add variety, it limits you on who you can play. What if I don't like the skills offered to one character, but I prefer the personality of one character over another? This might seem like I'm taking something and blowing it out of proportion, but once you remove features from a sequel, people start to get upset. And there are better ways you could handle this. Instead of making it another character, make it a subclass or a different perk with a different name. Like, think of it this way. Imagine if you had a perk that was the SWAT perk from Killing Floor 2, but it worked for assault rifles instead of SMGs. Instead of commando, you could have called it soldier or marine. Or how about a perk that's more for movement speed, but it actually favors shotguns? Let me give you a few more examples here. In Killing Floor 2, there are a lot of weapons that use electricity and some that can also freeze Zeds. Imagine if there were perks that were specialized to those weapons that weren't perk specific, like a frost perk or an electrician perk. The idea on how they could play would be very similar to Firebug, but would fill the niche of weapons that aren't based around fire. It may seem simple, but I feel like that this is something they could have done to add more perks to the game instead of the method of making each character specialized. Or what if we took this even a step further and made it like a set of weapons are tied to one of these perks, filling specific niches? Like how about a cowboy perk? They specialize in revolvers, lever actions, bows, and some shotguns. Or how about a gadget perk where they are meant to set up mines, drones, sentries, and even tripwires? But they don't have much going on for them when it comes to stat upgrades for their guns. This way you can appeal to a wider range of playstyles. I think what I'm struggling to understand with the specialist system is what is the end goal? Because what it seems like to me is that their plan to make it so that way you can play the game however you want is to have so many options available to you that one of them has to fit your niche. And if that is the case, then once again, why are we combining that with the characters? If the whole idea is to allow the player to do what they want, then why do that? What I'm trying to say of all this is that they should just make the perks specialized, not the characters. Because I think that's the issue that people have. They want the freedom to play who they want without restrictions like they have for the last two games. This specialist system that we have seen so far feels more appropriate in like a Borderlands type game, an RPG. And while I totally be down for like a Killing Floor open world RPG if they choose to ever go down that route, then this system would make sense to me. But that's not what we're expecting here. We're expecting more of the same wave-based shooter that we've been playing for almost 2 decades. What we're really looking forward to are just more improvements all around. The enemy designs look great. The bosses we've seen look fantastic, and I'm excited to fight them. Not to mention, it looks like we can customize attachments on our weapons. That's something I'm super excited for. That's something that I thought was going to be added into Killing Floor 2 because of one of the videos they showed us, but that's not what we ended up getting. I'm really happy to see that we're going to actually get that system in Killing Floor 3, and I think that's going to kind of help the specialist system in a way. Being able to customize a weapon to fit your playstyle for your perk makes a lot of sense. Like imagine in Killing Floor 2, if you could take the ACOG scope off the FAL and just use like a red dot sight. It would have been a lot better for Commando. But what really annoys me is just this one aspect of the game. Everything around it looks fantastic. The game looks great, sounds great, it probably is gonna feel great, but just that one spot of customization is the real problem I have. Now, I'm still looking forward to Killing Floor 3, and maybe the system won't be as bad as we think. Unfortunately, until we try the game, we won't know for certain. And I'm sure if it comes out and people still hate it, then they'll probably have to look at how they can adjust the game to make it work. They'll probably end up just doing exactly what I said, separating the perk from the character. And either way, I'll be here making more Killing Floor content, so subscribe to see that. But I am curious to hear your thoughts on what we've seen so far for Killing Floor 3. The gameplay trailers make it look really fun. It's just this one thing that irks me the wrong way. I feel like the weapons and even abilities we've seen so far are going to be really fun to play, but they just have this one thing that really bogs it all down. Not to mention the custom maps, man, I love Killing Floor custom maps. They're some of the best. And hopefully they'll be able to take advantage of the crawlers crawling on the walls and the ceilings, because supposedly that's fixed for Killing Floor 3. That was something that we were excited for Killing Floor 2, but had to be scrapped. The entire reason why it was scrapped was because they didn't know how it was going to work for custom maps. It might not have worked at all, so they just kind of got rid of the whole thing, because custom maps are very important. Doom 2 E1 M1 hallway, right? How about a gas station with a really fast smart car? Those ring any bells to any of you? But until next time, I've been CabooseDOTexe, and I hope to see you folks soon. Remember, stay hydrated, and as always, I love you! Bye-bye.